Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Legends of the Jedi. Last time, we finished off the Sith War story arc. Today, we'll be covering the very last story arc in the Tales of the Jedi. It's called Redemption. Redemption was comprised of 5 issues, and it ran from July 1998 to November 1998. It also bears the distinction of being the last Tales story arc ever published. You see, after the Sith War, Kevin J. Anderson and crew went back in time and covered the Golden Age of the Sith and the Fall of the Sith Empire arcs in the comics. Those were the stories that we talked about in episodes 1 to 5 of the podcast. Eventually, they returned to finish Ulick's story in Redemption, and that's where we are right now. The story was written by Kevin J. Anderson and drawn by Chris Gossett. It takes place 10 years after the Sith War, so if you're keeping count, the year is 3986 BBY, or 3,986 years before the Battle of Yavin. In today's episode, we'll be covering all 5 issues. That's right, all 5. But before we delve into it, we have a recap for you from the opening scrawl of issue 1. The time is 10 years after the devastating Sith War, which turned Jedi against Jedi and wreaked great destruction on the Republic. Exar Kun, the self-proclaimed Dark Lord of the Sith, has been destroyed in his Massassi temples on the jungle moon of Yavin. His chief lieutenant, Ulick Qel-Droma, was stripped of his powers, blinded to the Force by Nomi Sunrider after he killed his own brother Kay. Since that time, Ulick has isolated himself, wandering powerless and trying to hide from his past. Meanwhile, Nomi Sunrider, now a charismatic leader in the Republic and a spokesperson for the Jedi Knights, has called a great convocation, the first in a decade. She summons all the Jedi to Exis Station, an isolated space city which is the new home for many of the artifacts rescued from the destruction of Ossus. But galactic politics have no further meaning for Ulick. Keeping his identity secret, Ulick has commissioned Hoggon, a down-on-his-luck spacer, to take him to a quiet place where he can live out the rest of his days. He wishes only to hide from the Republic, become a hermit, and hope history will forget what he has done. Hoggon ferries him to the isolated moon of Yavin 4, without knowing Ulick's own connection to the place. So here we go, issue 1. It's titled, A Gathering of Jedi. It opens in on the Yavin system. We discover that Yavin 4 has already recovered from the devastation of a decade ago. If you remember from the Sith War, the Jedi did this kind of mind meld thing where they used their Force powers to cause the entire moon to erupt in a great conflagration. Flying above the moon, we have Hoggon, the scavenger, talking to the solitary passenger in his ship as he flies towards Yavin 4.
Believe me, I think it's just what you're looking for, my friend. A great place for solitude. Nobody chattering all the time. Huh. Don't talk much, do you? Once I take us in for a landing, you'll see what I mean. After this, I'm heading to Exis Station. Nomi Sunrider, ever heard of her? Yep. She called a great Jedi convocation, and I want to be able to say I was there. I just love watching the Jedi, don't you? Great events happen here on Yavin 4. You can get a real sense of history, you know?
Hoggon lands the ship and disembarks with his passenger, a weathered, grizzled-looking man. He starts pointing out various landmarks to him. It's clear from the narrative that he has no idea who his passenger is.
Yeah, see here, this was Exar Kun's main Sith base during the war. Those ruins there? They're the temple he built. But Ulick Qel-Droma betrayed him in the end. All the Jedi came here and put an end to the Dark Lord, yes sirree. Can you just imagine those ships in the air? Yes sir. I think Yavin 4 would be a great place for peace and quiet. Gives me the shivers to be here. I can almost feel the echoes. Can't you?
The passenger looks around, seeing ghosts from his past everywhere that he looks.
No, this won't do. This won't do at all.
In another part of the galaxy on the planet Ryloth, a defeated and exiled clan seeks a new mountain home. But we're told it's bad timing, because a heat storm is coming their way. Okay, pause for a moment. For those of you who don't know, Ryloth is the homeworld of the Twi'leks. The Twi'leks are those aliens in Star Wars that have the 2 head tails hanging down from their head. So they live on this planet Ryloth, and it's a rocky, barren world covered in mountainous terrain. Okay, unpause. This particular clan is being led to safety by none other than our Twi'lek Jedi friend, Tat Donita. But there are some things even a Jedi cannot do. such as fight a heat storm. Knowing that he's out of time, Tot Danita holds his hands out and calls on the Force. He uses it to rebuff the heat storm. At first, the storm buckles, but then it begins to fight back. Donita is eventually overwhelmed by the massive energy. Sometime later, other Twi'leks find Tot Donita face down on the ground. Part of his face has been burned off by the heat storm. The Twi'leks tell him that he must rest, but he answers that he cannot stay. He has to leave Ryloth for the Great Jedi Convocation despite his injuries. Speaking of the Convocation, the story shifts at this point to Exis Station. It's an ion mining and solar flare skimming facility in the Teedio system. As we know from the opening scrawl, Nomi Sunrider, as Grand Master of the Jedi Order, has called all the Jedi together here to discuss the future of the Order. We see a red-haired teenager in a white dress shout out, "Master Thon, you came!" Our brave Jedi Master Thon, not looking a day older than when we last saw him, ambles forward.
Vima Sunrider, child. You look more like your mother every day. Are you too old to hug Master Thon?
Vima Sunrider is much older than she was when we last saw her. She's 14 years old to be exact, and indeed, she does look like Nomi. Vima gives her old master a warm hug, and she tells him how glad she is to see him. She tells him that Nomi is so busy with the meeting, but she would love to show him around. Before she can do that, Thon and Vima are interrupted.
Thon, greetings. I hope the Jedi have come to this convocation to listen, for I have much to say.
The interrupter is none other than the Cathar Jedi, Silvar, who we last saw getting knocked out by a Misasi warrior on the doomed planet of Ossus during the Sith War. Personally, I'm glad to see she survived, but it looks like she's been nursing a healthy grudge ever since. Here's what Thon says in response.
Silva, you have grown too bitter, but I am glad to see you nevertheless. We should go to the main hall with Vima. The convocation is about to begin.
In the main hall, Nomi Sunrider addresses a gathering of thousands. My fellow Jedi, thank you for coming to Exis Station, our first great convocation in over a decade. If you remember, the last Jedi convocation that I can think of in these comics happened in episode 9 of the podcast, when Master Arca was killed by assassin droids. So here we are now, years later. Nomi continues with her address. Many of our fellow knights fell in the Sith War, and many new students have since been trained. Together, we have suffered a great disaster, and now comes a time for healing. War has spanned the galaxy, but now it is over. We can never forget the dead, but we must also not forget the future. We must trust in the Force. As long as there are Jedi Knights, there is hope. Vima watches her mother on the holo in another room. Blah, blah, blah. If Mother is such a hero, how come all she ever does is talk? Also watching her address, Thon muses on how Nomi has become an even greater Jedi than he had hoped. She's a natural leader that others will follow. Silvar's thoughts turn to Ulic Keldroma, a war criminal that remains unpunished. As this is occurring, Nomi continues. We must rebuild the Republic and restore its glory. In typical teenage fashion, Vima grows bored of this and starts to wander the station. She comes across the mining ship bay. Surveying the ships, she says to herself, I bet I could fly one of these. In the next panel, Vima is flying one of the mining ships in a formation of other mining ships. Unfortunately, she doesn't really know how to operate the controls and she finds herself caught in a magnetic loop. In the middle of her speech, Nomi stops speaking. She senses Vima is in trouble. Master Thon and Silvar can also sense the danger. Vima ejects out of an escape pod, but she starts to get pulled into the orbit of a nearby sun. Luckily, a nearby ship manages to grapple her escape pod and reel her back in. That ship is being flown by none other than Tot Donita. He reflects on how lucky Vima was that he was late for the Jedi Convocation. Back on Exis Station, Nomi rushes to her daughter. Vima, oh Vima, you're safe. Tot Donita, thank you. I could sense your fear, Vima. I was so worried. But what are you doing, a stupid risk of your life? How can you expect to become a Jedi when you make such brash choices? Vima shouts back, Yeah, well, maybe. If you would spend some time training me as a Jedi, I could have gotten myself out of this mess. Meanwhile, across the stars, Hoggon's ship comes out of hyperspace, above a planet called Rhen. It is a world just emerging from its latest ice age. He turns to his passenger and he says,
Yeah, well, let's try this planet on for size. A bit cold for my taste, but it may just suit your, personality. The civilization here died when the glaciers came. Be careful, though. With the big thaw, a lot of landscape is unstable.
Bringing him to the planet's surface, Hoggon continues with his sales pitch.
So, if you like this place, then I can be on my way and maybe still catch some of the Jedi convocation.
The issue ends with Ulic Qel-Droma looking at his new surroundings.
Yes, Hoggon, I am satisfied. This place will do nicely.
And with that, the first issue ends. Issue 2 of Redemption is titled The Search for Peace. The issue opens with Hoggon docking at Exis Station. Arriving late to the Jedi convocation, he flags down one of the hangar crew.
Dakar, old friend. Am I too late? Has the Jedi convocation started yet?
The deckhand turns to him.
Yeah, they've been at it for days. But what do you care, Hoggon? You're no Jedi.
Yeah, well, it's always been an interest of mine, a fascination. Say, is there someplace I could watch?
With a few coins exchanging hands, Dakar tells him that there's an old air shaft looking down in the gathering hall. In the next panel, we see Hoggon sitting inside the air shaft looking down with a pair of binoculars. He recognizes the Jedi addressing the crowd as Silvar.
Fellow Jedi, Ulic Qel-Droma betrayed the Jedi Knights, and we allow him to wander free, unpunished. Conspiring with Exar Kun, Ulic brought a devastating war to the Republic. We lost so many of our greatest Jedi in the Sith War, including my own mate Credo.
Silvar explains to the crowd that her people, the Cathar, mate for life. She will never take on another lover. She has since completely devoted herself to the Jedi way. She considers herself a true soldier of the Force.
Ulic was once our greatest Jedi Knight. Now he is our greatest shame.
Standing off to the side with Master Thawne, Vima mutters to herself,
Oh, come on. He couldn't have been as bad as that.
On the desolate planet of Rhen, Ulic makes his way across the snowfields. It's a quiet and empty place, and yet he still cannot find any peace. The Force has abandoned him. Activating his lightsaber, Ulic begins to practice his forms. This lightsaber, the great weapon of the Jedi Knights, is now nothing more than a mere tool in his hands. Ulic slashes through a statue with his saber, left behind by a long-forgotten civilization. As he stands at the edge of a cliff, pondering his fate, he fails to notice the snow begin to give way under his feet. Before he can react in time, Ulic falls off the side of the cliff and plunges into the abyss below. Back on Exis Station, Vima studies holographic images of her dead father, Ander Sunrider, and her mother's second great love, Ulic Qel-Droma. She believes that her mother resents Ulic more for leaving them than for what he did during the war. She calls out to Nomi.
Mother, can you work with me on my Jedi training now? I'm anxious to learn what I can. Not today, Vima. The convocation is just winding down and I have 1,000 details to look after. It'll be soon, though, I promise. Promise, promise, promise. That's all you ever do.
At this point, Vima's fed up with her mother. She returns to her room and begins to pack her things.
A real Jedi is resourceful. I'll just have to find my own trainer, maybe even Ulic himself.
With a travel pack and a coat, Vima sneaks out onto the hangar deck of Exis Station. She opens herself up to the Force and lets it guide her towards her future. Scene change to the Twi'lek planet Ryloth. We see Tot Danita is back here, and he's brought Silvar alongside with him. Having sensed much anger in her, the Twi'lek Jedi was able to convince Silvar to accompany him to his home planet. As he guides her towards his clan's new city, they are stopped by a Twi'lek elder. He tells Tot Danita and Silvar that they've been attacked by a rival clan. They tried to fight back, but their city is new and their defenses are not yet in place. Many were slaughtered. Tot Danita explains to Silvar that this has gone on for too many generations. He intends to speak with both clan leaders and put an end to this bloody cycle of conflict. He asks Silvar to help his people in his absence. Sylvar agrees, and she immediately is put to work. She's given a pickaxe, and she's told that she can help reinforce the wall by removing debris.
I am a warrior, not a stonemason. If you want me to help, let me help you to fight back. I'll use this tool for an even greater purpose. To free your clan.
Holding the axe up high, she begins to address a crowd of gathered Twi'leks. More accurately, she begins to whip them up into a frenzy. She tells them to get their weapons. She, a Jedi Knight, will lead them into battle.
You can hurt them in the way they have hurt you, hurt your families. Follow me, and we can put an end to this bloodshed. We can stop them forever.
As the crowd begins to shout in approval, Tat Danita arrives and he yells at them to stop. He tells them that peace does not come through more spilled blood. He has already spoken to the clan leaders, and they have reached a resolution according to a Twi'lek tradition. He admonishes Sylvar. She was too quick to choose the path of violence, and she should know better as a Jedi Knight. Tat Danita was able to find a better way. The two clan leaders will go together into the Brightlands, aka the Sunblasted Desert, and the two clans will then merge with the head clan. Because of these two leaders' sacrifices, there will be peace again. Sylvar is ashamed of her anger and quietly asks Tat Danita to take her back to her home of Cathar. Now, if you remember, that's not only the name of her people, it's also the name of her planet. A little confusing. Back on Rhen Var, Ulik finds himself surrounded in darkness. Images of Nomi and Kay begin to flash before his eyes as he relives all of his past sins.
Is this death? If I am not dead yet, I will be soon. No matter, I came to this place to die. Now is as good a time as any. My heart is like the ice around me. Why won't it just stop beating?
Uh-oh, we have emo Ulik alert. Anyways, an apparition appears in front of him.
Because you must live, Ulik Keldroma.
Ulik's eyes widen.
Master Arca? Are you real, or are you just another ghost like all the others? There are no simple answers, my son. Life is not simple, but still, you must live.
The vision of Arca holds out his hand.
I can't. I have no Jedi powers. You have what you have always had, my son. You have your inner strength.
Suddenly, we see a hand punch through the snow. Resolving to live, a battered Ulik claws his way out of an avalanche. We see the faded remnants of the Sith tattoo on his forehead as the sunlight crowns his head, producing a halo-like effect.
I will live. But for what?
That is indeed the question, Emo Ulik. You have to find out what you're going to live for. Back on Exis Station, Nomi watches through a viewport as ships depart. The conference is at an end, and now she finally has some time to rest. As she returns to her bedroom, she realizes the hologram of Ulik is missing. At that moment, Master Thawne bursts into her room and tells her that Vima is missing. Nomi has this moment like Catherine O'Hara in Home Alone, where she's on the plane and she realizes she left Macaulay Culkin back in Chicago, where she's like, Kevin! Anyways, Nomi yells out, Vima! Moments later, we learn that Vima stowed away on none other than Hoggon's ship. I guess the Force works in mysterious ways. When Hoggon hears some noise in his cargo hold, he finds Vima hiding. She tells him that she's looking for Ulik Keldroma, and goes one step further by showing him her mother's hologram image. Hoggon realizes the man in the holo as the very same man he just left on Rhen Var before coming to Exis Station. After a promise to pay him well, Hoggon decides he'll take Vima to Ulik. The issue ends with Hoggon landing on Rhen Var.
I dropped him off here in a frozen fortress over yonder. If he really is Ulik, you're crazy to go to him.
If he really is Ulik, I want him to train me as a Jedi.
Here, take this transmitter. If you need anything, I'll be in range for another day or so. May the Force be with you.
As the ship flies away, Vima reminds herself that she is the daughter of Nomi Sunrider, and that she will not leave this place until she is a Jedi. The issue ends as she stalks off into the frozen wasteland in search of Ulik Keldroma. Issue 3 is titled Homecoming. It begins with Vima entering the frozen fortress on Rhen Var. She calls out into the empty halls, saying that she is seeking Ulic Qel-Droma. She is met with silence. Vima ventures further into the fortress. She must cross over crumbling catwalks, where any fall to the ground below would result in her death. She thinks to herself that finding Ulic is going to be harder than she thought. As she approaches a new area of the fortress, she notices a large imposing shadow in the distance, and she begins to run towards it. Say what you will about Vima Sunrider, but one thing she has is guts. On the other side of a crystal structure, Ulic's large figure stares down at her.
Who are you?
Looking closer at her face, he says,
Know me?
Ulic begins to walk away, thinking this is nothing more than another vision from his past.
Even this place now holds too many ghosts. I must be going crazy.
Vima, who was frozen in fear mere seconds before, snaps out of it.
Ulic? Ulic Qel-Droma, wait! I've been searching for you!
She approaches him.
Hey, listen! Nomi was my mother. I'm Vima. Vima Sunrider.
Why have you come here? You can't punish me any more than I already punish myself.
No, Ulic, please. I want you to train me as a Jedi.
Train you? Don't be stupid. Do you have any idea who I am? I can't train anyone. I can't even feel the Force.
He grabs hold of her hand and begins to drag her outside.
I didn't come all this way just to be reminded of your mother's face. Go home.
Ulic leaves her on the frozen fields a little way from his fortress and begins to walk back.
I thought you were supposed to be a great Jedi. You're no hero, Ulic. No hero at all.
Vima tries using her transmitter to get a hold of Hoggon, but it won't work because of the weather. She looks around and she realizes she can no longer see the fortress anymore because of the blizzard. She begins to shiver in the cold when a hand grabs her.
Come on, you'll die out here in this blizzard.
Ulic begins to look around for shelter, but realizes very quickly that he is also lost without the Force to guide him. Vima is able to use her power to point them towards some abandoned wreckage. Ulic tells her to make herself comfortable, as there's no telling how long the storm will last. On another world, we see Silvar and Tot Danita walk through a landscape towards a giant tree-like structure. She thanks Danita for coming with her to her homeworld of Cathar. They are both greeted by other members of her race, quite literally a welcoming crowd. We learn that Silvar's people live in giant city trees. Another thing we learn about the Cathar is that they apparently need their pageants, and the great Jedi Knight Silvar is their most celebrated child. A huge procession has been prepared to welcome Silvar home. Throngs of supporters cheer her as she and Tot are ushered onto a raised platform.
I know they mean well, but I wanted solitude and peace. Instead, this only reminds me of the things I have already lost.
Later that evening, Silvar meets with an old mentor, a Cathar priest named Kharr. He meets with her on a thick branch of the city tree.
I can sense the storm in your thoughts and in your heart, Silvar. You have come here to regain your peace, but you don't know where to begin your search.
Credo was killed during the Sith War, and I can never take another mate. I can never have children. Ulic Qel-Droma still lives, still free, unpunished.
You are fighting the wrong enemy, Silvar. The anger is within you. You must overcome it.
With these words weighing heavy on her mind, Silvar decides to go on a blood hunt. It's a Cathar ritual, a cleansing among her people, and she hopes it will purge her of the fury inside of her. The next morning, Silvar tells Tot Danita about the blood hunt and asks if he will go with her. He tells her that he would be honored to accompany her on her quest. Back on Rhen Var, Vima and Ulic are huddled around a glowing cube. They're still taking shelter from the storm outside. Ulic finds out from her that her mother has no idea she came out to seek him. Vima tells him again that she wants to be a Jedi.
Do you realize the cost of being a Jedi? I have watched my master slain, murdered my own brother, betrayed your mother. All of this only to become blinded to the Force. I can no longer bear my own memories, Vima. I have wandered too far and seen too much. I have the blood of enough children on my hands, so tell me, why would you want anything I can teach you?
Looking at him with the same eyes as her mother, she simply says, Because you're Ulic. That's why. At this point, we flash briefly to Hoggon's ship. He's walking back and forth with nervous excitement. Things are not adding up for him.
I can't believe I had Ulic Keldroma, the Ulic Keldroma, on my ship, and Vima's Sunrider. Her mother Nomi won't be happy about this, but I have to tell someone. Maybe Master Thawne? The Jedi need this information. I'm the only one who can give it. Hell, maybe they'll send a whole battalion of Jedi Knights to fight Ulic. I have to talk to Nomi Sunrider.
After those two brief segues, we return to the planet of Cathar. Silvar is running across barren wastes while Tot Danita runs after her, trying to keep up. She tells him that these lands were devastated by something called the Kiltik. Killing these creatures would be a mercy to her planet and, she hopes, will quench the fires within her. These Kiltik sleep during the heat of the day, so both Jedi must venture into a dark cavern to find their prey. They ignite their lightsabers. Tot Danita wields a blue blade. Silvar's blade is bright pink in color. Perhaps hearing the sound, a giant insect-like creature approaches. Silvar slashes through it with her lightsaber. She tells Danita that this is a guard drone, easy pickings. She intends to make her way to the Queen Chamber. So here we have it. The Kiltiks are these giant-like beetle creatures that the Cathar will hunt down during one of their blood hunt rituals. Entering the Queen's Chamber, an enormous Kiltik is surrounded by scores of smaller Kiltiks. They begin to surround the two Jedi. With rage in her eyes, Silvar declares that she can kill them all. She begins to slash left and right with her saber, killing these bugs indiscriminately. She becomes a terrifying whirlwind of teeth, claws, and lightsaber. After some time, Tot Danita yells at her to stop. He tells her she's finished. Silvar is surrounded by the bodies of the dead, including a dead queen. At this point, Tot Danita admonishes her. She didn't get rid of her anger, she gave into it. She's walking the path of anger, and as he points out, she knows exactly where that will lead. As he begins to walk away, Tot Danita tells her that she needs to work this out for herself. He reminds her to remember what happened when Ulic Keldroma gave into his anger. The issue ends back on Exis Station. Nomi receives an incoming transmission. It's a recorded message from her daughter.
Hello, Mother. I'm safe and I have great news. I'm going to be trained as a Jedi. I'll be learning everything I can. You'll be proud of me. Ulic Keldroma is going to teach me.
While she's listening to this message, one of her aides appears in the doorway beside Hoggon. Nomi ignores both of them. She looks up in anguish and says,
Vima, what have you done?
And the issue ends. Episode 4 is titled The Trials of a Jedi. It opens in on Silvar stalking across the vast Cathar outlands. It's a place for solitude, a place to hunt, and perhaps most importantly, a place to forget the past. Silvar continues her blood hunt ritual. She still seeks to extinguish the flames of violence within her. As quick as a cat, she springs towards her prey, a small gray herbivore enjoying some grass. Although she kills her foes, she feels no relief. The blood on her hands has not cleansed her at all. Later that night, she builds herself a fire and looks up into the night sky. There are so many stars in the Republic, and yet here she is all alone with her anger and her grief. At that moment, she senses someone approach and again springs into action. She grabs the man, another Cathar, and flings him to the ground.
Who are you? Speak the name of your clan so their ghosts can guide you into death.
Wait, Silvar. I'm a scout come to find you. I have an important message. Nomi Sunrider's daughter is missing.
Silvar snatches the scroll from the messenger and reads it over. Standing up, she turns to him.
You'll live another day. I must go see Nomi Sunrider.
On the planet of Rhen, we find out that Ulic has decided to train Vima after all. I guess she finally got through to him. They are back at his fortress now, and though he no longer has access to the Force, he has apparently taught her everything he knows. Ulic muses to himself that he has never seen such dedication in any student. There is much of her mother in her. Vima is meditating quietly in front of 3 floating lightsaber crystals and does not even hear Ulic approach.
Come with me, Vima. It's time for your next step. Take your Adagan crystals with you.
Ulic brings Vima to a table covered in mechanical components.
Every Jedi must have the proper weapon.
Guided by the Force, Vima knows what to do. She tells Ulik that these crystals belonged to her father, Ander, and that he was going to build his own lightsaber, but he was killed before he had the chance. She assembles the components and activates her saber. A green blade shoots forth from the newly constructed weapon.
It works! My very own lightsaber! Just like a real Jedi Knight!
I have not used my own for some time, but it still functions like new. Ulik brings his own lightsaber to life, and a yellow blade shoots out. In the next scene, we see Vima and Ulik sparring atop the ruins of the frozen fortress. Have a care, and never let your attention falter. The lightsaber is a dangerous weapon. Back on Exis Station, a desperate Hoggon is being dragged away from Nomi's quarters by a pair of guards. He is trying desperately to get an audience with her so that he can tell her about Vima. As he's carried away, Hoggon shouts to Nomi, "But I have important information. I know where to find Ulik Keldroma. He's on a frozen world by the name of Rhen. Did you hear me? You gotta listen to me." Minutes later, he's sitting on the ramp of his ship. Hoggon begins to fume. If Nomi won't give him an audience, he resolves to find another Jedi to tell. He begins to think about who else would want to find Ulik badly enough. At this point, we're back on Rhen. Vima is practicing her lightsaber forms while Ulik watches. He tells her that she's a great student, but he can no longer teach her. It looks as though he's slipping back into emo Ulik mode. His depression is getting the better of him, and again, he tells her that he's no longer a Jedi.
Ulik, you're just making excuses.
You don't understand. I'm like an artist who's been blinded. I can no longer see to paint.
Then, become a sculptor. With your talent, you could do anything. Feel your way if you can no longer see.
It's all so easy for you, isn't it? All right, we'll try sculpting then. Back on Exis Station, Nomi is holding her lightsaber in front of her, staring at it.
I always hated these weapons. I never wanted to use them.
When her husband Ander was murdered, Nomi was forced onto this path, and now her daughter Vima has gone down the same path seeking glory and heroes. She regrets that she ignored what her daughter needed at the time, and now Vima's gone. She sets the lightsaber down. She resolves that Vima has made her choices, and perhaps one day she'll turn out to be a proud Jedi Knight.
And who better to teach her the cost of a Jedi than Ulik?
At that point, Nomi's solitude is interrupted by an old friend.
Nomi, I have received your message. Any news of your daughter?
Silvar, I knew that you would come. Yes, Vima is with Ulik. He is training her to be a Jedi. He is doing what I failed to do.
When she hears Ulik's name, Silvar drags her claws against the wall, leaving gouge marks.
Ulik, how can you let him near her?
Ulik has a good heart. I can't believe he would harm her.
Ulik Keldroma is the worst living war criminal in the Republic. He is no Jedi Knight, and no teacher.
Silvar, wait.
I knew your heart was soft, Nomi. Now I think your mind is soft as well.
As Silvar leaves Nomi's chamber, snarling, she begins to walk away. A desperate Hoggon intercepts her in the halls and tries to flag her down.
Now is not a good time to talk unless you want to lose your eyes or more.
But Ulik, I know where...
What about Ulik? How dare you even speak his name to me?
But I know where he is. I know how to find him.
At this point, Silvar has lifted Hoggon right off the ground. She sets him down.
Just come with me, Silvar. I can take you there myself.
We flash back to Rhen. Vima and Ulik have just finished building scaffolding against an icy cliff. Now, standing on the scaffolds, they ignite their lightsabers. Form the image in your mind. Picture what you wish to create and let the Force flow through you. Both of them begin to use their lightsabers to carve the ice around them. Ulik thinks of Arca, the image of his master burned in his brain. He can still use his lightsaber to accomplish good work, even without the Force. On her end, Vima thinks about her father. She never knew him. In fact, all she has to work off is some hollow images that her mother kept, but the way her blade works against the ice feels right. It's almost as though she can feel his presence. The memory of her father is larger than any sculpture she could ever make. When they finish, Vima and Ulik stand back and look at their work. They've created a type of frozen Mount Rushmore. On the left, we see the face of Master Arca, and on the right is a likeness of Ander Sunrider.
Good work, Vima. We have honored them both.
Surveying their work, Vima smiles.
Ulik, I think you've proven you have the heart of a Jedi, no matter what powers you have left.
As with the last couple issues, this issue ends on Exis Station. Nomi is supposed to be packing for her return to Coruscant. Instead, she's crying, thinking about how she neglected Vima and shortchanged her Jedi training. She spent more time invested in her work for the Republic than on her own family. She looks at a holo image of the two of them together.
No wonder she ran away. Time to be about the business I was trained to do. No more meetings, no more negotiations. Vima is all I have left. The Republic can do without me for a time. I am a Jedi Knight. Training Vima is my job. I must get there in time, before Ulik causes too much damage.
So it looks like Silvar's words actually had an effect on Nomi. She's had a change of heart, and the issue ends with her setting off to retrieve her daughter. Before we jump into issue 5, I do want to point out that these comics also have the Jedi Journal's letters column, but there's really nothing too interesting in them, and so that's why I haven't talked about them. So in case you're wondering, they still exist. They're there. Okay, with that out of the way, let's head into our final issue. Issue 5 is simply titled Master. The issue opens in on Ulik and Vima sparring atop an icy cliff. Vima starts to taunt him, and he tells her that she is becoming overconfident.
Vima, your progress is excellent, but you've let your guard down several times.
Vima flashes out with her saber and cuts a pendant off of Ulik's neck. It's actually kind of funny because in the one panel, this pendant appears to be a ring, and in the next, it's actually represented as a coin. In later panels, it looks like a ring again. Uh-oh, major continuity error. Vima taunts Ulik a second time. Now who's letting his guard down? Ulik angrily grabs the pendant before it falls to the ground.
Have a care, Vima.
Ooh, quick temper. Better not get you angry. I might start another galactic war.
She runs off, hopping over an icy ledge.
Careful, Ulik. Remember what happened the last time you got too close to the dark side?
Ulik stares after her, his expression set stoic, his mouth downturned in a grimace. A moment later, a snowball smacks him right in the face. He wipes it off, grimacing in anger. A smiling Vima is standing in front of him.
I sure taught you a lesson, didn't I?
And then, in probably the most beautiful moment of this comic, so much so that it's making me choke up as I try and talk about it, Ulik's expression turns from anger to compassion. He smiles at Vima, and then he playfully runs after her. When the two reach the end of a tall structure, they stop to take a rest.
So, am I a Jedi now?
Make no joke, Vima. Being a Jedi will involve making life and death choices. You'll have to face terrible ordeals. It is very easy to become trapped in a corner with nowhere to go. You will look down into a terrible precipice, and then what will you do?
So, how does one become a Jedi Master?
There isn't a rule book or a simple test to take. I am no Jedi Master. I can't even feel the Force.
On another part of Rhen, Nomi Sunrider directs her ship to the derelict frozen fortress in the distance.
You can't hide from me, Ulik. Not even in this hellish wasteland. I know you. I know your mind. I know your heart. I know your guilt. And now you have my daughter.
As she pilots her ship into one of the large open structures, Nomi thinks about how this place reminds her of Ulik. Isolated, frozen, crumbling. Again, she wonders, of all the teachers in the galaxy, why would Vima pick him? How could Nomi have failed her so badly? She leaves her ship and she begins to walk through the halls of the fortress. Inside one of the main halls, Vima turns to Ulik.
My mother. She's here. I can sense her.
Moments later, Nomi Sunrider comes face to face with Ulik Keldroma, and I really pause here to give some praise to Chris Gossett. Two of the panels are just Nomi's eyes, and then Ulik's eyes. Gossett did an amazing job of portraying the profound sadness and regret in both of those eyes. After a time, Nomi looks away and tells Vima that it's time to go home.
No, I'm staying here. Ulik has already made me a Jedi.
Outside the fortress, there are more visitors. Hoggon weaves his ship through the abandoned towers.
Silvar, I am so glad that you let me fly you here. I can't believe it. A real Jedi Knight on my ship. It's like I'm making a piece of history.
Hoggon flies them to the back of the fortress to avoid any immediate detection.
I can help you out. I got my own blaster. I can watch your back if you need it.
Looking solemn and grim, we see Silvar has covered her face in ritual markings.
I won't need it.
Back to the Sunriders. Vima turns on her lightsaber blade to show her mother. She tells Nomi that Ulik has taught her so much, she understands the Force now.
He is not at all the kind of man you told me he was, and you know it, Mother.
Nomi, I didn't ask her to come here, but I did teach her what I could. She is your daughter, not mine. If you're ready to teach her, she's welcome to go. You can complete her training. Vima realizes that this is one of those precipice situations Ulik warned her about. She tells her mother that Ulik saved her from a blizzard. She asks her mother to give her a chance and let her show Nomi what she has learned. Taking her daughter's hand, Nomi tells her that it's what she always should have done in the first place. Vima takes her mother outside and she shows her the ice sculptures that they made.
You and Ulik did this?
Yeah, but it's already starting to melt. I tried to make the face look like my father's. Nomi whispers her dead husband's name and embraces her daughter, tears streaming down her face. At the same time, the sculpture of Ander Sunrider sheds some water near its eyes. Is this part of the melt or the will of the Force? Either way, it's a beautiful expression of the grief associated with the loss of a loved one. Back inside the fortress, Ulik looks out the window. Master Arca, you were right to convince me to live. I did have more to accomplish, and more to learn. I sense that Vima will be a great Jedi someday like her mother. The past still weighs heavily upon me. I have many things in my life, but they weren't all bad. Perhaps I can find peace now. At that moment, Ulik's soliloquy is interrupted.
Ulik Keldroma, I have searched for you across the galaxy. Even in a place like this, your festering presence is like a beacon to me. Justice will be mine.
Justice, Silvar? What is justice?
You must die, Ulik, for your crimes against the Republic, for all the blood on your hands, for your alliance with Exar Kun, and especially for the death of my mate, Credo.
You know what kind of person Credo was. Don't blame me for his choices. You shaped him as much as I did. None of us are innocent. Ulik ignites his lightsaber. I've had to overcome my own guilt. Can you overcome yours? With a snarl, Silvar attacks, her pink blade clashing against Ulik's yellow blade.
You have to do more than just defend, Ulik. That's you or me. You'll have to kill me if you mean to live out this day.
As the two continue to clash, Ulik asks Silvar why she can't just move on and bury her past. She tells him that he hasn't been punished enough. No one can be punished enough for what he did. Their battle takes them outside along a steep ledge surrounding the fortress. At that point, both Nomi and Vima sense the struggle and run off to put a stop to it. From a safe distance, Hoggon watches in excitement as Silvar corners Ulik. He's at the edge of a steep drop on one end of the fortress's battlements. Ulik looks over his shoulder at the drop below and turns back to address his opponent. I cannot change the past, but the dark side is slippery, as you yourself should know. I tried to hide. I tried to die. And finally, I tried to atone. You are not my judge, Silvar. You are simply a pawn of your own emotions. Ulik disengages his lightsaber and he holds it in front of him, eyes closed. I will not fight you. Silvar swings viciously at him, a swing meant to decapitate, and her lightsaber stops short, inches away from his neck.
Damn you, Ulik. Damn you. After all this time of hating. Of all the people to free me from my anger, it was you.
Suddenly, a blaster shot rings out in the distance and strikes Ulik square in the chest. Silvar shouts out in surprise. Vima shouts Ulik's name, and Nomi clutches her chest in pain. We see Hoggon, of all people, approaching, and he's holding his blaster in a victory pose.
I can't believe it. I just killed Ulik Keldroma, the worst Dark Jedi criminal in history, and I shot him. I can't wait to tell everybody at the cantina.
Vima appears on the scene and runs toward Ulik's crumpled form. Hoggon continues to talk, oblivious that Silvar is stalking towards him.
Hoggon the Great. History will surely remember.
Silvar grabs him, interrupting the boast.
If not for the man you just killed, I'd be tearing out your throat right now.
She throws him on the floor, and Hoggon runs off, muttering about how he'll never understand Jedi. As we turn back to the fallen Jedi, we see Nomi is also on the scene, and she's cradling Ulik in her arms.
So much wasted time with you. With Vima. Nomi. Forgive.
Rest easy, Ulik. I've already done that.
Ulik smiles and he turns to Vima. He strokes her cheek and wipes away her tears.
Vima, remember, possibilities.
He grabs his pendant and he gives it to Vima.
Take this, Jedi.
With those final words, Ulik dies. Nomi buries her head and begins to weep. Then, something miraculous happens. Ulik's body begins to fade from Nomi's arms as he becomes one with the Force. Nomi is left holding the remnants of Ulik's tattered clothing.
Vanished? But how? Only a Jedi Master.
She turns to her daughter.
Vima, if not for your light, Ulik might have never seen through his own darkness.
Nomi passes Ulik's robes to Vima.
Ulik was blind to the Force. He had no powers. He had lost everything. How could he have still been a Jedi, much less a Jedi Master?
Vima stands up.
Ulik may not have been able to touch the Force, but he understood it, more than any of us.
She lets his robes go, and they fly off into the wind.
Ulik Qel-Droma had the heart of a Jedi.
Curtain drop. Issue ends. I don't know about you, but I'm going to need a moment to process some of that. In Redemption, we didn't have any galactic threats or all-out wars, but this was perhaps the most impactful story of all. And the sad news keeps coming, because I'm also sad to say that this will be the last time we see our friends Ulik, Nomi, and Vima. But in the words of Luke Skywalker, no one's ever really gone. So now that we've finished the final story arc of the Tales of the Jedi, we'll be moving on to new stories. But before we do, be sure to join me next time for a bit of a wrap-up, a Tales of the Jedi post-mortem, where we fill in some of the gaps, and we look ahead to the Knights of the Old Republic.
We would be honored if you would join us.